Guten Erev Shabbos. For many of you, by the time you hear this, will be Matzah Shabbos. So I'm recording this from in New York. It came a couple of days ago, and to celebrate the engagement of my daughter, Mushka, to her husband, Shmuel Yosef Greenbaum of Melbourne. David should helpen. Should be Binyan Adiyad, B'day Hashem Yaveirach. Lots of nachas, and thank you to so many people who did send in wishes, response, Kol Hamvorech Mizborich, Yodei Hamleya Absuchach Leshav Archovo, and all be blessed with the abundant blessings of Hashem in all you need, Bone Chayim and Zayin Reviche, children, Nosa, health, in all in abundance. So let's go now to our questions, which we have during the past week, and a bit shorter than usual, a busy week traveling, etc. So, first question which I have on the list is after Tachanun at Shacharis. So one morning this week, in a particular shul, so the Chazan, instead of saying just half Kaddish, he went and said the whole Kaddish. In other words, he said after Tachanun, he said Tiskabeil after Damir B'olna B'imur Omen, he said that Tiskabeil leeway all the way and stepped back for Isa Shalom. So should he now? Normally, only at that point we're going to say half Kaddish. Should he now go back and say after LeTziyon, should he say the full Kaddish, or should he say without Tiskabeil? So let's explain a little bit more, just to fill you in. The term Tiskabeil means may their prayers be accepted upon high. And that is particularly focusing on the Shmoina Esrei. So that is said after Shacharis, after Mincha, after Ma'ariv, and on whenever Musaf is said, that is said after Musaf, at any other stages in davening. So either it's like a shorter pause, and then it's the half Kaddish. If it's after Tehillim or similar, like after Shir Shal Yoim, it'll be, or after Aleinu, it's Kaddish Shalom without Tiskabeil, otherwise known as Kaddish Yosem. And if it's after Mishnayos, learning Torah, so then it would be Kaddish D'Rabbanan. So now, here's a question that normally the understanding is that the Kaddish after LeTziyon, Tiskabeil leeway, is connected to the Kaddish, is connected to the Shemona Esrei. And for some reason, it's not said right after Shemona Esrei, it's said after LeTziyon. This time, he said Tiskabeil earlier. So he's already said Tiskabeil leeway, he's already said the prayer for the tefillah to be accepted. So therefore, it seems to be logical that there's no need to say it a second time, because he already said the Tiskabeil leeway. But before rushing to answer this, I think we have to go back one step back. If indeed it's so logical that Tiskabeil leeway refers to the Shemona Esrei, so then we need to address why was it then, why are we putting it a stage later on a regular basis? Why are we normally doing it after LeTziyon? Why aren't we saying that Kaddish as early as possible, right after Shemona Esrei or right after Tachanun? So this has to be addressed before being able to answer with confidence the question at hand, whether Tiskabeil should be said again or not. So again, what's the question? Why is Tiskabeil leeway not said closer to after the Shemona Esrei, after Chazaras Hashaz? Why is it said later? So actually, this is a typical question for the Levush. So whereas other poskim deal with basically the Halocho, the Levush is very much into background, explaining how this may get evolved, etc. So here we have on the screen, you have a quote from the Levush in Siman Nun Hey. Siman Nun Hey is addressing the first Kaddish, which is mandated after Yishtabach. And so he really goes into the discussion about the Kaddishim. There also a Siman Nun Hey, that's where you talk about the minimum of a minyan, etc. So let's read the words of the Levush. Ma she'ein oimrim tiskabel miyad achar hatfilah. Achar tfilah shmona esrei. Why is tiskabel not said immediately? Hainu mishum deseider kedusha. Bosra tfilah gereda. The kedusha which we say in a LeTziyon, Korazel Zaviyam Kaddish Kaddish, etc. And that's where the Gemara in Sota talks here, and Alma Kaimo Kedusha de Sidra. So we're saying Kedusha in a LeTziyon. And that Kedusha Bosa Tfila Greira, it's kind of appended to the Tfila, the Fishe Me'enya Me'inyan Tfila V'Shabach. Because it has within it a kind of prayer, kind of praise. Therefore, it's reflecting the same themes as the Shemona Esrei itself. Therefore, Tiskabeil will be left until after Kedusha, so that this prayer, Tiskabeil Tzloisin, should also include the Seder Kedusha. So, in other words, there's not so clear what his answer he's explaining, but there's certainly a kavana. There was an intention why this Kaddish, why this inclusion of Kaddish of Tiskabeil B'Tzloisin was put not immediate, but at a later stage after LeTziyon, to include that also in the Tiskabeil B'Tzloisin. Now, when I saw this question, my first go-to sefer is a sefer all about mistakes in davening, etc. Shkiyos miyovin, very much a contemporary sefer. And predictably, he had on this question, he had several opinions, at least two. One saying you should say Tiskabeil, and one saying you shouldn't say Tiskabeil. The one who particularly says you shouldn't say it again seems to be the sefer Sefer Beis Shloime. The Beis Shloime, his name was Reb Shloime Drima. He was a Rov in, I believe, in Hungary, whatever, or in Galicia. Reb Shloime Drima, Olav Shalom, who had the store in Crown Heights, was a direct descendant, and actually he funded the reprinting of his Zaydas Sfarim. So he says not to repeat Tiskabeil Tzloisin. Once you've said it, you don't have to say it again. What we have on the left of your screen is from a sefer called LeTziyon. LeTziyon, I've mentioned him in shiurim before. I had actually the good fortune to meet him when I started into Rabbonis. So I went for close to a month for Shimush in Yisroel. And I went to various Rabbonim to get from them ideas, guidance. One of them was Rebbe Elazarov. Rebbe Elazarov was then probably well into his 80s, quite frail, but he agreed to meet me. So he wrote these sforim called LeTziyon. Just to fill you in why he gave his sforim this name. He was a Rov in Yerushalayim during the time of the British Mandate, and he would answer shilas for the prisoners who were the Yiddish boys who were imprisoned by the British Mandate for their revolutionary activities. So you know the name Reb Aryeh Levin, very much associated with that period. But Rebbe Elazarov, he was passing shilas for the Jewish boys who were imprisoned, and so his term LeTziyon Shloim Asirayich, we have in the Kinnis, on which we say on Tisha B'Av, LeTziyon Tziyon Halotishalich Shloim Asirayich. Tziyon should ask for the peace of its prisoners. That's in the name of his sefer LeTziyon, and so he writes, and this is unrelated to his career in answering Shabbos in prison, but he answers this question. This is a fairly common question apparently, and he writes, "Lafi aniyas daiti hoya nire laima shagam," that even they should say, "You see, Rov of Tiskabeil again," because the first time was a mistake. And therefore, there's no svara that we should, because you made a mistake earlier, therefore you shouldn't do the right thing now. And he brings a lashon of the Gemara in Brachos. If someone has eaten garlic and he has bad smell, he has a foul smell in his mouth, so he should eat another piece of garlic. So on this idea, so you did a mistake. You didn't say, you said Tiskabeil when you shouldn't have said it. That doesn't justify making another error of not saying it when you should say it. Then he refers to the Beis Shlomo, to Reb Shlomo Drima's sefer, who says the opposite. And he says it depends on the circumstances. There he may have been talking about a different type of error. Let's say it would be Motzei Shabbos. If instead of saying the Kaddish Shalom after about the Kaddish had been said earlier, I don't remember exactly, but he says it could be he was addressing a slightly different instance, but in this instance he feels that he should say Tiskabeil a second time, and the fact he made a mistake before, okay, but you made a mistake before, but now do it right, which to me makes a lot of sense, and especially when you have a later authority who's seen the words of the early one, so then that makes it so much more reliable. Idea of Hilchos Kabasroa. You follow the later authority. When he has seen the earlier authority, considered his words, and still formulated opinion to the contrary. Okay, if is a person who's reliable authority, so you rely on the later one. Point number 2 was a question which was on the list for the previous shiur, and for some reason I overlooked it. And a couple of people asked me about the omission. I said I'll deal with it this week, Bez Hashem. So a fairly common question, but this woman made a grocery order online and received some whatever, and received some dairy products, whether it's chocolate, whatever it may be, and it happens to be that it wasn't Cholov Yisroel. Now we know that there are many fine Jews who do not subscribe to the idea of Cholov Yisroel, that they will use dairy products without mashgiach going out to the fields, to the dairy farms, and they are relying on Pri Chodosh, and then up later Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, relying on the fact that there's a government regulation, whatever consideration, other considerations. As a result, they are okay with having chocolate or whatever other products which are not Cholov Yisroel. I want to throw in something. I had a couple of shilas this past week. A woman from Italy up from sends me shilas, and she's asking me about cheese. She sent me a whole a shop, a range full of all different cheeses. She says, for people who don't eat Cholov Yisroel, are they allowed to have cheese? So I responded to her, this is all derech agav, by the way, I responded to her that there's a separate Isur Gevinas Akum, besides the Isur of Cholov Akum, which may or may not be relevant, applicable because of government supervision, etc. There's a separate thing of Gevinas Akum. And the reason for this is that Chachamim forbade this, it's Mishnah in Avodah Zarah, that because cheese is made with rennet, causing of the solidifying of the milk is with rennet, and it was common to use animal rennet, which means taking the stomach of a cow and drying it out, and then that's dipped into the milk, and apparently that has a chemical effect to separate the curds and whey, etc. And so this is a very interesting topic. That why is it that if it's kosher from a kosher shechted animal, then the cheese is kosher, and if it's from a non-shechted animal, the cheese is not okay. So when it comes to if it's from a kosher animal and kosher animal was shechted, then we'll say that since it doesn't have a taste of meat, so it's not a problem milk and meat together. And nevertheless, if it's from a non-shechted animal, so then what's called nevela in Lashon HaKodesh, so then we cannot ignore that this change of structure was brought about. The catalyst for this change of structure was this rennet, and it was non-kosher rennet. And therefore, the cheese is also. So that's a side issue about givinas akru. But here we're talking about not cheese, we're talking about, let's say, chocolate or yogurt, perhaps. So Reuven he has this non-Cholov Yisroel stuff, Cholov Stam, Cholov Nochri, and he has a neighbor who this is what they are quite happy to use it. So is it okay for Reuven to give away to Shimon something which Reuven himself would not use, but Shimon does use it? Is it a problem of lifnei iver? Is it a problem of giving something to someone else, something which you yourself wouldn't rely on? So let's say in a similar question, when it comes to the year of Shemitah, produce of Shemitah, so in Eretz Yisroel, there's many Rabbonim, many poskim who have allowed what's called heter mechira, so the sale of the land to goyim, and as a result, there doesn't have a problem of kedushas shviyas. The more Haredish Rabbonim have not accepted this. So now, if I live in Haifa and I have a grocery shop, a makolet, am I allowed to sell stuff which is heter mechira? That's a similar question. It's a standard which I myself would not rely upon. Am I allowed to sell and provide this kind of product for others? And the general guidance on this, and you can see on the list of Marim Mekomis, the general guidance of this is it's not a problem of lifnei iver. You're not misleading anyone because they're relying on their poskim. So to mislead someone they don't know, and you're misleading them. Here they're saying, for me this is it's kosher, it's reliable. I'm allowed to rely on this because that's my Rov says it's okay. In that case, the provider would not be guilty of misleading because the beneficiary is relying on their own authorities. So not everyone agrees. This view that to provide stuff which you yourself won't rely upon because you're not satisfied with the kashrus, but you want to give benefit to someone else, that would be okay. Let me just throw in another parallel. Let's say if you are in an area where there's an eruv, which you yourself don't rely on the eruv, would you be allowed to give someone a bag to take home for their benefit? So then, and they use the eruv. So that wouldn't be a problem of lifnei iver. Where it would be more interesting if you're asking them to carrying something for you, and then it becomes an interesting dilemma. If it's not good enough for you, why are you asking someone else to do it for yourself? But if they are the beneficiaries, that's the primary. Then that would be more lenient. That's not a problem of lifnei iver. If you want to look it up, you have the sources. One of them is in Encyclopedia Talmudis, volume 37, the entry of lifnei iver, and that's on page Shiur. We'll go on to the next point. Very, very common question about light sensors. I just want to go back to the question about the Cholov Yisroel, and that is, someone asked me this past week about a particular product. Oh, it was about baby milk, and they are expecting to give the baby. The woman is expecting to give birth. It's a little bit more complex than the regular birth, and expects to have cesarean and a prolonged stay in the hospital. And the hospital will insist on giving the their milk, and which is not Cholov Yisroel. So it turns out that this milk which the hospital will provide is made from milk powder. So I told him that really, you try what you can, try to get Cholov Yisroel stuff, but if push comes to shove, there is the hard Tzvi, who was Pesach Frank, was the Rov in Yerushalayim, going back 50 years ago or more, 60 years ago. But he was asked about lactose, which is used in many, many tablets, medications. And he takes the view that just like there's a heter, as far as butter is concerned, that butter cannot be made from anything that, other than cow's milk. And therefore, the Lashon of Shulchan Aruch is ein nimches bi'adam mekilin. There is a tolerance for those who are use butter which isn't Cholov Yisroel. So his understanding is that milk powder can also only be made from cow's milk, not from non-kosher species. Consequently, he allows the use of medicines which have milk powder in them or lactose because it couldn't be made from anything other than a cow. Okay, cow's milk. Yeah. Okay. Now we come to the next question, a very, very common question in mainland Europe, where so many people are, majority of the population, I guess, in towns and cities are living in apartment buildings. It's becoming more and more common. The two issues. One is about electronic or electric locks, which is one issue, but the other one is about the lighting in the hallways, that there are sensors, and when you walk through, so the lighting goes on, and you want to get to your house, you have to stay put in your house, in your apartment, or you're allowed to walk through the corridors, even though the lighting is going to be activated. Now, there is a term of psikresha. So you want to say, I don't have intention. I'm walking through, I don't need the psikresha. It's inevitable. But if you have no benefit from it, so we have a term, psikresha de neighbour. It's an inevitable consequence, but you have no interest in that happening. And the Oruch, who lived about 1100 years ago, he takes the view that psikresha de neighbour is permitted. Others disagree, and it's not allowed. But then, if it were an Isra min HaTorah, it'd be more chomor. If it's an Isra Rabbanon, would we rely on the heter psikresha de neighbour? So we'll look at this in a moment inside. But what is the lighting? Is it lighting incandescent bulbs, which that is eish mamish, a glowing hot metal wire inside the tungsten inside the bulb? That's more a shiur min HaTorah. If it's fluorescent, if it's LED, which is becoming more common, if they're into saving money on lighting, probably they're using LED bulbs or lighting which are not there's no H there. Therefore, you're talking about psikresha de neighbour, which the Rabban. What do I mean neighbour? So what is really crucial here is there minimal lighting in the hallway? And so really you could manage without the lighting, which is switched on, because there's a bit of a security light. It's quite dim, but you're not going to fall over. You can see where you're going. But then for comfort, the bigger lights go on. Then you could say, I can manage without those, the extra light. Then you can say, psikresha de neighbour. I'm not interested in those extra lights. I can manage without. Then there's room to be mekel that you would be allowed to walk through. Whereas if there's no lighting in the corridor at all, only it is pitch black, unless the sensor is activated, then you cannot say I have no interest. Of course, or you can't walk in pitch black. It's very it can be dangerous. Even you might bank into something, miss a step. So of course you need the light. Then it would be harder. And so if that is the case, okay, so what you have in front of you is actually from an article written. There's a volume called Shacharis the Chazan Rabboni Europa. So we have an organization called Merkaz Rabboni Europa, and we used to have a monthly newsletter which would have a Halocho article. So And then later, these articles were put together and put into a volume called Shalos Hashuvas Rabbonai Europa. And here, one of the Rabbonim addresses this, and this is his conclusion. And in the following article, the first one was from someone called Rabbi Haltovsky, who lived in Antwerp, and then Rabbi Yirmiyah Cohen, who's a very eminent Talmud Chacham, Rov in various communities. He also weighs in with the same conclusion, practically, that you are allowed to rely on if there is minimal lighting in the hallway, then you can rely on the principle of secretia de la nichole to be able to walk through. If it is, the arrangements are that there is no lighting at all in the hallway. So then the recommendation is that the Jewish householder who owns an apartment should, before Shabbos, put in the corridor. He should put in his own lighting, lantern, or battery operated possibly, have it hanging in the hallway, and then he can say, I don't need to have the extra lighting going on because I already have lighting there in any case. Of course, that's going to be easier if it's only one floor. If there's going to be several floors, it's going to be more of a challenge to do it. But that is really the only way we could allow walking past and the sensors activating the lighting, because you could manage without. So really, this is what you have on the sheet here on the screen. He says that in the fourth paragraph, he says if the corridor is absolutely pitch black and without light, you wouldn't be able to go there, then you would say it's nichole. You do have benefit from the sensor lighting, and then you wouldn't be allowed to walk through on Shabbos. So I said this is an arrangement you can make, that there should be a battery operated or whatever, some kind of minimal light from before Shabbos for the evening, and that would allow you then to walk through despite the fact you're activating. Now, of course, all of this is not a comfortable arrangement. What I'm getting the impression from the people living in various cities in Europe is, it's very, very difficult to find a dwelling without conceding on this. And so it just can sometimes be a question, do I just stay in a tiny apartment, suffer even for years till I find something suitable, or do we go along with this? The other one with the door entry, that's not as simple. On the other hand, there's a solution. You can find some way of having a signal to someone who's inside, who should come and open the door for you, etc., etc. Yeah, that's another parsha with how do you release the door? Does it mean you have to press a button to release? Can you release it mechanically? But that's another discussion. But meanwhile, we're talking about the light sensors being the issue. Okay. I want to continue I had some further feedback about the whole story about the hotel in Yerushalayim, where the Arab waiter said that they warmed up the fish and the chicken with gravy on Shabbos. Right. So now we've got here two issues. One is if it's done by a Yid, and then so someone wrote to me that there is a heter to, I think that's what we had last week, that if the Jew puts it on the hot plate before it goes on, and then later it'll go on. So what we have here on the screen, a couple of sources. One is from the Chidah. Now, the Chidah is around the time of the Alter Rebbe, and there is a rule about Amir al-Nachri. Amir al-Nachri says, Rabbana, what if the issue at hand is debated? So I think I've used that example in the past. I won't open a can on Shabbos because of the worry of binyan, of yesh binyan b'keil. Now, the word yesh bin b'keil, main bin b'keil is machlokas in Bisham Bis Hillel, and it remains a machlokas throughout the generations. Yesh bin b'keil or ein binyan b'keil. So we are machmir as if that yesh binyan b'keil, which means that there is, if you make a keil, you're in violation of Baina. But there remains an opinion which says, Ein binya b'kelim, it's not a problem of Baina. So for Amira l'nochri, we can rely on the more lenient opinion. So when you have a machloikas lahalacha in a question, it's a min haTorah. So as far as asking a goy to do so, you can rely on the lenient opinion who says it is permitted. So I would ask a goy to open a can, I wouldn't hesitate, because of the combinations, Amir al-Nakhri, and the Yesh Oimrim Ein Binya B'Kelim. So the Chidor uses the same idea here with reheating a liquid. If you remember last week, we had the discussion, Yesh Bishlach HaBishul B'Davalach or Ein Bishlach HaBishul B'Davalach. Is reheating a liquid subject to the issue of bishul or not? And we paskin that reheating a liquid is called bishul, and we consider it isim natayra. It doesn't take away from the fact that there is an opinion that ein bishul bishul b'davalach, that reheating liquid is mutar min hatayra. So as far as asking a goy, one can rely on the lenient opinion that ein bishul bishul b'davalach, and therefore it would be permitted to ask a goy to reheat liquid. That is what the Chidor writes in his sefer. Now he's got a sefer called Birkei Yosef, and then he has a further sefer called Machzik Bracha, and then it's a volume called Shiur Bracha, and these are all commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch in a orderly way, and throughout the whole of the Shulchan Aruch basically. And so this is in the Shiur Bracha in Siman Shin Yud Ches. And as the Chidor was really very much, although he was a tremendous, Talmud Chacham in his own right, but he's very much a malachit. And you can see here at the end of the line, he's writing Maharash Shar Aryeh and Maharil, etc., etc. Okay, Maharil Valley. He brings from some poskim some past Fardish poskim who rely on the fact that Bishul B'Davalach is debated, therefore they allow asking a guy to do so. Right, that's about asking a guy. From the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, which we saw last week, Siman Gimel Sif Chav Hei, it's clear that the Alter Rebbe doesn't allow it. He doesn't say that, but if it was done, then you would be permitted to use it. And you can ask the question, why? What's the guidelines? Why sometimes do we say, oh, since it's something nochri, you can rely on the minority opinion? Okay, that's the question is how this opinion, which we don't follow, how far is it from being accepted la halacha? So I guess the weight, how much weight does it have? The more weight it has that it is accepted, the more it would be allowed to ask a guy to do so. And if it's less accepted, so then perhaps one wouldn't be allowed to ask a guy. So, but it would be okay, as I've just said. To ask a guy, according to the Alter Rebbe, I get the impression the answer is no. Right. So now we're coming back to the other question. What about putting a gravy or similar on a hot plate, which is going to switch on Shabbos? And so that's what someone had written, that is okay. So I was given two references. One to someone sent me a shiur of some rabbi here, and I think here can be United States or England, but it doesn't matter. He gave a reference to Shmiras Shabbos Kol Chosa and to Rebbe Vadia Yosef. So I did not have the references to Rebbe Vadia Yosef's exact one, but I've got the Sefer of Yalkut Yosef, which is from his son, from Rosh LeTziyon, Rabbi Yitzchok Yosef, and he writes the following: Yesh oimrim, that you are allowed to place on Friday. You can put a cold food, the soup, on a hot plate, which is switched off. And on Shabbos, this hot plate will switch on with a time switch, and the soup will reheat it. Others disagree, even if you had put the soup there before Shabbos. Ha'ikar Ladina is that you can rely on the first opinion, So you can see here clearly, he's saying if the soup was placed on the hot plate before Shabbos, that also is debated. And there he takes the lenient opinion, and possibly also incorporating the svara of ein bishul achar bishul, even bedovelach. But he's only allowing it from before Shabbos. He's not allowing on Shabbos. That's with the same time switch, yeah? But he only allows it if you do it before Shabbos. Now let's take a look in the Shmir Shabbos Gelchosa, his other source. He says you've got here a kadera which has got hot food and cooked food. You're allowed to put it on an electric stove, which is not working now, and it's on a time switch, and then it'll be switched on during Shabbos. Now, if you put that pot on before Shabbos, now let's say it's 8 o'clock, it's going to switch on. How about at 7 o'clock, you take the pot off just for a minute and you put it back? Now he says that's not allowed, because once you took it off, the status quo is going to remain cold. When you're putting it back, as you are effectively cooking it indirectly. So this is Reb Shlomo Zalman's Auerbach's edition. You can see this is from the newest edition of the Shmir Shabbos Gelchosa. In the older edition, this is a note at the back that Reb Shlomo Zalman says, don't take off the pot off the cold stove and put it on a cold hot plate and put it back before the reconnection. So that's clear that he does not allow putting it on when on Shabbos, to put it on, take it. So in other words, the picture of taking out a soup from the fridge and putting it on the hot plate an hour before it's going to switch on, neither Yalkut Yosef, neither Shmir Shabbos Gelchosa permit this. To ask a goy, yes. To ask a goy, here you can say to a goy to place a tavshil, a pot with food. It's cold on a hot plate, which will be switched on presently, with it hot. So then that will be okay. To ask a goy to put it on before the hot plate is switched on. Okay, that could be okay. It seems to be okay. So then after I put this on the screen already, so then I saw further communication. Someone is writing that you would be allowed to put it on Shabbos if this Moroccan fish, which has got a gravy, if it's what's called mitztamek veralo, it's not enhancing its taste, it's going to spoil the taste. That whole thing seems to be very. First of all, you're seeing here it's very schwach to allow it, and also the practicalities. Is it true that the gravy is going to have a deteriorating taste, or the contrary, it's actually going to become more geschmack? So that all of this doesn't hold, and to put it on Shabbos, that would not be okay. And one last thing that I know that Rav Padva Zichron Livracha, so who was the Rav in London for many years, he refused the caterer's request to have the kugels sitting on hot plates, which are going to switch on by a time switch on Shabbos. He felt this whole idea that you have, now it's cold, and then it's going to switch on Shabbos, it's asking for trouble. People are going to abuse it, and you're going to say you get to put it only on before Shabbos. The next thing is they're going to put it on Shabbos, and it's just asking for trouble. So the caterers would have loved to have this system. They could have kugels switching, cold kugels on cold hot plates from before Shabbos. On Shabbos morning, it switches on. So like this, the kugel will be hot and it won't be dried out, and it will be geschmack, and they'll get another job next week, etc. The caterers would love to do that, and Rav Patva did not allow it because of it is asking for trouble. Okay, so that's as much as for this parasha about the reheating liquids on Shabbos. One last thing which I have on the list. So, no, I've got two more things. One is about reheating, leaving liquid uncovered overnight. I'm sorry, for some reason it's not on the screen, but you have a source in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch. So you have here that. So you have a source in Shulchan Aruch and in Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch. So in Shulchan Aruch Siman Yoredeya Kuf Tazai, that's where we have the dinim of foods which engage a sakon, which is a danger. So there are many things which, for some reason, Chachamim were concerned, and they told us for safety reasons don't use this. And one of those is mayim geluyim, water or other liquids which have been left exposed. The main reason is because of the possibility of a snake crawling in and having a sip and leaving some venom. So then the Shulchan Aruch itself says that nowadays it's hardly likely that snakes will find their way into our kitchens and into our drinks. Therefore, liquids which were left exposed overnight is not a problem. You are allowed to have that. So people very often ask this question, that's why I'm addressing it. Is there a problem with a jug of orange juice which was left open overnight? And the answer is it is okay. With the exception of wine. In case of wine, then there is in Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, which you have here in the dinim of Kiddush. So he says you should not use wine which was left exposed, because it's the kind of thing which you would not offer to an important person, and therefore you shouldn't use it for Kiddush. I use the famous expression. I think we discussed this in previous shiur, so I apologize about repeating myself. Akrivehu no lefecho secho. Would you offer this to your account? And okay, one last thing, and that is, as I was on the traveling this week on Wednesday, somehow I managed to damage one of my fingernails, and there was like, I guess I couldn't see, but I could feel it, like a split, and like when you pass along a smooth surface, you can feel like it's catching. And then I realized I have a problem for Netzilas Yadayim. I'm a very little fan of mazonos bread. So if it's bread I'm having for a meal, it's hamotzi. So, all right, what do you do for washing Netzilas Yadayim on the plane? Okay, so we're not normally so happy to use the bathroom, but that's the only facility. I think that's more mehuder to use the water and do Netzilas Yadayim than to the cop out called mazonos bread. And you're having mazonos bread and having a full meal, and you're missing out on a mitzvah of the proper bracha of benching, which is a mitzvah in the Torah. Anyway, so now I've got this split nail. Now, here becomes a question of chatzitza. Basically, the water has to cover when you wash Netzilas Yadayim, like when you go to mikvah, so the water has to cover the entire body. There shouldn't be any hefsek, which chatzitza means like split, like the word mechitza, something which is a barrier, which is not allowing the water to come in contact with the skin, etc. And so with the Netzilas Yadayim, we have the same idea, that there should not be a chatzitza, there shouldn't be anything interrupting between the water and your body. So now, when you have a cracked nail, so then the surface of the nail should have water reaching there. In the crack, also, it's now the surface. What was till now inside the nail, which water doesn't need to reach inside the body. Now you've got the surface has got the crack. Is a surface inside, two surfaces of either side of the nail. But because the nail because of the pressure of the way the nail is, water is not going to penetrate inside the crack. So really you have a problem of chatzitza. So let's read this in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, and then we'll read the reference in Yoredeya in the dinim of chatzitza for Tvila. So in Siman Kuf Samach Aleph, we have here the Alter Rebbe writes, Sorich, let's read this carefully, Sorich lizoher, one needs to be careful, b'tziporin with the nail, shepirsho miuto. If part of the nail, if the minority of the nail has been disconnected, lokutz oisa, you have to cut it away. Shehi chitzetzes, because that little part of the nail is going to be a problem of chatzitza, as discussed, as will be discussed in Yeridea Siman Kuf Tzadik Ches. Unfortunately, we do not have the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch on Yeridea Kuf Tzadik Ches, but this is what we have in the Shulchan Aruch of Rabbi Yosef Karo. He writes, Tzipoiren ha-meduldeles, that's Kuf Tzadik Ches Chaf Aleph, Tzipoiren ha-meduldeles. If there's a nail which is a little bit dangling, Shapir Shom Mi'uta, only the minority of the nail has separated from the main body of the nail, then we have a problem of chatzitza. Per sharuba, if the majority of the nail has separated, that's not a chatzitza. And you look in the Taz, etc., and basically the idea is, if the majority of the nail is broken away from the main body, then the crack is a wider crack, and the water of the mikveh, or in our case of Tirsi Daim, will be able to enter inside, and therefore it's not a problem of chatzitza. If it's only a minority of the nail is loose, so then the loose bit of nail is going to be more pressed against the main body of the nail, and hence is going to be a chatzitza. Now, I want to just throw in one more point. There is also an idea of kol ha'oimed likotzis kekotzis dami. There is, when it comes to mikvah, we take the view that if it is slated for removal, then it's as if it were removed, and that represents itself a chatzitza. So let's say before mikvah, a woman normally cuts her nails, and if she doesn't cut her nails, so then there's an argument to say this: the nail edge, which would have been exposed through cutting of the nails, needs to be, well, it's as if it were cut away already, the top of the nail, and therefore that the thickness of the nail needs to have contact with the water. But meanwhile, the nail hasn't been cut, so therefore water can't get there. So there's this opinion which says that even if the nail is in perfect condition, but because it's slated for removal, then already that's a chatzitza. It looks like the Shulchan Aruch here is not taking such an extreme position, although in mikveh we are careful about that. He's saying here it's already cracked, but it's the minority, not the majority. But meanwhile, it is an obstruction. The minority of the nail is an obstruction for the water to reach there, and as a result, it does create a problem of chatzitza. So if someone caught me on camera biting my nails, that's because I had a problem of chatzitza and I didn't have nail clippers. So that was one way of solving the problem. If it would be a problem on Shabbos, that would be another parsha, but then I wouldn't get caught on camera, hopefully. Meanwhile, I'll wish you a good Shabbos and Matzah Shabbos, and Gott Tavach for those who are going to hear Matzah Shabbos. And we should hear Soros Tovis, Soros HaGeula, for those hearing Matzah Shabbos. We should hear the Besuras HaGeula from Eliyahu Hanavi, who tell us that Mashiach is on his way, and we should see the Geula Shleimo, Mashiach Zakeinu, Malkeinu V'Rashenu. Kol Tov.